Bob,
Yeah.
why don't we do hybrids anymore on the channel?
Good. I mean, there's nothing interesting in hybrids. It's a done deal, isn't it? It's finished. It's old technology.
The thing is, we do get some questions about them. People tweet us and they ask our thoughts on them, whether we can recommend them, which types are worth their time, which types are. Do you think maybe we should just do a little mini episode where we just kind of discuss our thoughts on them?
Well, I suppose we could. I mean, as long as I don't have to go out and stand in a cold field to film it.
I mean, we could do it here and now. I mean,
What, in the office?
this could be the episode.
Could it?
Welcome to Fully Charged. Hello and welcome to Fully Charged. Today we're talking hybrids, which is something that we haven't done on this channel for a very long time, Robert. We get asked about them from time to time. Most of you aren't interested at all. You just want to hear about the battery stuff. But every now and then we get a little tweet saying, what's this type of hybrid? What's the difference between this one and this one? Is this good? Who is this for? And we thought it might be useful to just to do a little synopsis of A, the different kinds of hybrids, the pros and cons of each, and B, ultimately answer a few of the questions and the burning question of, is there a point to them?
Yeah. Because I mean, I think that's there is historically, absolutely, there's a massively important role for them. They were really, really critical in kind of facilitating the shift. And this is not technological, this is psychological. You know, people had a go in a Prius and it went along for like a mile without using any petrol. And if you drove it carefully, you know, that size car would on average get, 35, 40 miles to the gallon. I've got 76 miles to the gallon in the original Prius, which was, you know, at the time a revelation. You know, it was like, that's amazing.
It's crazy to think that just 2 decades ago, the Prius was not only this groundbreaking, futuristic technology, but it was sexy. People wanted to be seen.
Which is quite bizarre, because it's not, I wouldn't really call it a sexy car, but what was interesting with that, and the sales figures for that, have been replicated with pure electric car sales, is that no one bought them. You know, when I got a Prius in, when would that have been? 2003, I think, it was when I first got one. There was something like, they would sell like 700 a year. And then cut forward 10 years and they'd sold 14 million. And it was taxis that did it. It was when taxi firms started using them, because they keep the spreadsheet of their fuel use. Yeah. They actually know how much fuel they use, and they realise they used it's about 45 to 50% less fuel that you would use in a taxi. And if you're running 200 taxis, that's millions. It's a lot of money. Yeah. So I think from that point of view, they had a really important function, and those were not plug-in. That was just I'm guessing, I'd call that a mild hybrid. Is that the right term? Is there something right?
I think we should begin
it's worth explaining
by
those
talking
things,
about the different kinds of hybrids and the pros and cons of each, just so that people are absolutely clear. I realised while doing a bit of research for this video that I didn't fully understand the different type. I don't think I knew the difference between a mild and a full hybrid. So let's begin at the beginning with a mild hybrid, which is no charging, a battery and motor assisting a petrol engine, and it never runs just on electric power. It never runs just on electric. The electric motor is always just helping the petrol engine. It's actually kind of more of a recent thing. You're seeing things like, for example, the new Ford Puma. It's got like a 1 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine. Right. Really small, really frugal, and the motor is there to make it more frugal and a bit more powerful. Right. Then we've got the full hybrid, or as some brands like to call them, Robert, the self-charging hybrid. That's the one that instantly I've got a little bit of twinge in my lower department. Let me just wind you up and set you off here. So again, no charging involved, no plugging in, you just put petrol in it, but you can run it just on electric power. So this is what a Prius was. A Prius it was just a Prius, now it's a self-charging Prius. Tell me why self-charging hybrids irk you so much. Well, it's only because, when I first saw it, I didn't even notice it. It was literally 2 people I met, 2 genuine human beings, one of whom was my lovely neighbour, who is not a car person, not the slightest bit interested, but knew I had electric cars, came over whenever they launched self-charging hybrids a couple of years ago,
and said, have you heard about the new self-charging ones? We're thinking of getting one. And I went, that's brilliant, well done. And he said, because it's you don't ever have to plug it in. Unlike your cars, you never have to plug them in. I said, no, but you have to get petrol for them. And it was just his face. He went, oh, that was it. And he didn't get one.
What did he think? How did he think
He didn't think. To work? I mean, because if we live in a sort of automotive bubble where even I have a basic level of understanding of how cars work, probably slightly above average. A lot of people just get in a car, they don't even know what it is, so from that point of view, they're just not interested. He likes gardening and he's got ducks, so he's got ornamental ducks, he knows a lot about them. Sheep, he loves his sheep. Sure. But as regards cars, you get in one and drive it, who knows how it works.
And it's an enticing term, the idea of self-charging, the idea of I'm being kind to the planet, I'm not using too much petrol, but I don't have to do all that annoying charging business. Yeah. It sounds good.
And it was really that, and the American advert that Toyota ran, which was, the Toyota Auris hybrid overtaking lots of old-fashioned cars in a desert. And that was used in this country as well, but they didn't use that. There was one shot, and it's about 1.5 seconds, of a man holding a charging cable in an electric car and looking at his watch, because he's got to, and that shot said, you don't have to do this.
Don't be this idiot.
Yeah, don't be this idiot that stands waiting to charge a car, holding the cable, as if anyone's ever done that, So that really got the old hackles up.
And then the kind of the dominant hybrid these days is the PHEV, the plug-in hybrid. Yeah. These are the ones where you've got a fuel tank, you've also got a battery. The battery is big enough that you actually plug it in to charge it. Yeah. Typically, they've got somewhere between 15 to 50 miles of pure electric range. And the idea of these is that you should be able to, the vast majority of your day-to-day, running about on pure electric power, and then there's an engine there when you need it. Thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, they were when I first heard about them, I thought they were brilliant. And I had, for a very short time, a plug-in hybrid Prius. And that was really not good. The battery was just too small. So that would do 12 miles, I guess, on electric. You just what was the point? But if you did charge it and then drive it just as as a hybrid with electric and petrol, you would get over 100 miles to the gallon, which I thought, well, that's good. That makes sense, because we should use this fuel as little as we can. This is back in the day. So that was a step in the right direction. I think what happens, and this is why I think it's kind of dated technology, is that it was a brilliant transitionary technology, particularly that. So many people that bought a plug-in hybrid Volvo, BMW, whatever it was, then went on to get an electric car because they went, I don't need the...
Yeah.
Because what you're doing then is you're driving around with a kind of 1.5 tons of engine and gearbox, which you don't need.
Well, in terms of the pros, you can sort of theoretically argue peace of mind. If you're someone who's afraid of that transition, it's the sort of the stepping stone. You've also, it's undeniably true that you've got a kind of wider selection of cars available. There's a hybrid Range Rover, there's a hybrid Ferrari. There's a PHEV Ferrari these days. But packaging disaster. It's insane to fit two powertrains to a car. Yeah. They're not actually necessarily cheaper to buy. No. They're certainly not cheaper to run, because you've got to charge them and put petrol in. And the big one for me is they're painfully slow to charge usually, aren't they? They're not quick to charge. So you're still spending quite a lot of time sat at chargers, and you have to go to the petrol station. Yeah. That's my nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, the one that was the interesting sort of crossover of that was the Mitsubishi Outlander, which had CHAdeMO, so it had rapid charging.
Right, okay.
And that will do. I mean, I drove one of those a really long way to do a talk somewhere. I think it was in Leeds or somewhere like that. So I drove maybe 250, 300 miles in it there and back. I can't quite remember. And I was getting around about 80 miles to the gallon in a really big, heavy SUV. Impressive. So then you think, well, that is... But I stopped at every motorway services and charged it, which you knew that a sensible human being wouldn't do that. Yeah. Because I was driving there waiting for probably 20 minutes to get it
sort of an
back
unrealistic use case. Just you're going like crazy. Max economy there.
But, so that was... But you probably could get 50, 60 miles to the gallon in a car the size of a Range Rover, and those were they sold incredibly well. They were very popular, and they did use chargers. I did see them at chargers, and I helped people on a couple of occasions. I remember where they'd reverse in, and then they'd be looking at the charger and going, what do I do? And of course, as always, they bought it from a dealership who haven't told them anything about how to plug the damn thing in, which still happens.
Well, how about this? We tweeted about this, that we were going to do this episode a week ago, and we got some really interesting questions, but also just kind of thoughts from our audience. Can I share some of them with you and sort of hear how they hit your ear? Okay, here we go. I'm just going to read these out in no particular order. So @PilotH20 says, I have driven PHEV, which is, I guess, just a sort of
hybrid,
hybrid, and BEV, which is a battery electric vehicle, just battery. Right. In my opinion, BEV is the best. PHEV is the worst of both worlds. Lousy range on gas and electric. BEV is less complex, i.e. less maintenance and more efficient. Yeah. Even though BEV has less range than ICE, they are cheaper to operate. Yeah. So that's a key one, isn't it? The running costs thing. You're not gaining all of the benefits of electric driving with the hybrid, because you're still a slave to the petrol stations and their prices, which is and also the maintenance costs.
The maintenance is the thing.
Wet bits.
Yeah, you've got a lot of. If you've got a piece of machinery with between 800 and 1,000 moving parts, you've got problems just intrinsically in the design and the concept of that machine. And that's really been the critical thing for me, is when I understood that, when I understood the efficiency of the best modern petrol engines. You know, and then you go, it's between 25 and 30%, and you go, I don't know what that means. And then you go, oh, wait a minute, if I put £1 into my car or $1 into my car, only 30 pence or cents moves me along the road. The rest is wasted. Well, that is shocking. Yeah. Because with even the rubbish electric cars, it's about 85% of the power you put in drives you along the road. Actually moves you. Yeah. So, you know, and a really efficient electric car, it's in the high 80s, low 90s, you know. So that is, you just think, well, that's a better use of that energy, if nothing else. And that's the
Okay, how about this? This is quite interesting. @Jack from Morley says, you always make the point that you don't need massive range because most trips people make are a few miles to the shops or work anyway. In which case, what's wrong with a hybrid? If the peace of mind is what it takes to get more people driving electric most of the time, why not?
I can't argue with that. I mean, I don't know why not.
I think the answer is you are still better off in a BEV. It probably just makes more sense to you. If you can make a PHEV work, you can probably make an electric car work. But if you are struck with this crippling fear of not having a petrol nozzle somewhere, and that's what it takes to ease you in, then so be it. It's not the kind of...
I mean, there are definitely problems with, you know, I haven't really heard it with plug-in hybrids, to be fair, but I mean, there definitely is a problem of having a tank of gas for 6 months that you don't use. I mean, petrol goes stale. I don't know about diesel, I know petrol goes stale, whatever that means, and you can have problems with an engine if it's not running for a long time and it suddenly starts up. You know, that's just a fact of that technology. And it's been mitigated to an enormous extent with modern engine design, but it still is, it can, so if you literally never start your engine for a year because you're just driving back and forth in a petrol car, what's the point of dragging around that tank of petrol, that gearbox, the incredibly complex machine? You know, it's that's
more weight, it's hurting your range, it's hurting your efficiency, it's costing you more, it's making the car worse to drive. It's like lugging around a sort of large human in the front of your car for no particular reason. This is quite interesting. We could do a whole separate episode on this one. This is from @MuppetKeeper.
Okay.
It says, my neighbour, who could easily have afforded an EV and has a driveway, was persuaded to lease a mild hybrid by his dealership, brackets, Japanese manufacturer. He came back saying that batteries cause too much pollution. So here we have a different scenario of dealerships sort of steering people away from the BEVs and towards something with an engine. Is this a problem that you're kind of aware of?
Very aware. I mean, my first example I heard was my own sister, who visited me when I was test driving the VW E-Up, which was the perfect car for her.
I love those cars.
They're great. It's such a great little car. And she went to a Volkswagen dealership the following week, a big one in the middle of Milton Keynes, which is the electric car capital of the UK. And they said, oh, you don't want to get the electric one. They're not reliable enough. They break down all the time. Get the diesel one. You go, or the petrol one, or whatever it was. And you go, that is amazing. That was the dealership. And they didn't want to sell her one. And there was another example of a dealership somewhere in the south of England that wouldn't sell a guy one, so he got a train to a dealership in Leeds, bought an E-Up, drove it back to the dealership where he originally went to and got, I managed to get one from somewhere else. But that was a few years ago. That wasn't recently. That was, But there's certainly a huge problem with selling electric cars through dealerships, through existing
there's
dealerships.
This bizarre disparity between the brands and the dealerships that are selling their products in terms of their agenda, because I don't know if it's just harder to make a big profit on an electric car if you're a dealership.
I think it's a challenge for a dealership.
They're not as keen to sell them, aren't they? I'm hearing some amazing stats coming out of America of the markups that you're seeing on like Mustang Mach-E's with $20,000 premiums.
Well, because they know that they're not going to have them back in 6 months to service them. I mean, they don't need to, and that's how they make, and that's how dealerships have traditionally made their money. They can sell a car almost at a loss because they know they've got that customer, that return coming back for spare parts and servicing.
Definitely. Okay, here's one. Callum Peters at Callum Tweeters says the big thing is showing people the difference between mild hybrid, full hybrid and PHEV. Manufacturers are just going with electrified too much and it misleads people into thinking they've gone electric by buying a mild hybrid Suzuki Swift. Really good point there. I think we're seeing a lot of that from brands. Oh, it's electrified. What do you mean?
No, that's very true. I know, and even when you see like sales reports of total sales and it says electrified, and it's a really different, it's amazingly huge difference between electrified and electric. You know, that's the thing, is that and they are, I mean, I think they've been a popular thing. If you look at, I mean, you and I both recently looked at the sales figures, and if you look at diesel sales in 2015, it was 48% of new cars were diesel. And if you look at it today, it's 7%. That is a fairly big, catastrophic drop in sales of diesels. But what's taken that place is either petrol hybrids, mild hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and then electric. Electric are now, most recent, because about 24% of new sales, which is mind-boggling, because you couldn't even register the percentage of those sales even back as recently as 2015. So that's changed. But the fact that it's very confusing, I think, for a lot of normal people who aren't that interested in cars but need to get a new car, or are going to get a new car, or maybe getting a company car, and they say, can I have an electrified one?
Yeah, I think it's deliberately confusing, isn't it? It's deliberately vague from brands because they can go, oh, look, we sold 40% electrified cars. And you look closely and you're like, well, that's got a 6-cylinder engine and little sort of AA batteries sellotaped to the side of it. It's a bit of a cop-out, really. Final tweet, this is my favourite one, at Simon Appley says, can Jack Scarlett dress up as Harry Potter and explain the magic of self-charging hybrids? They are magical.
Genius idea with a wand. Because we've got to come up with one of with the spell, self-chargify, or whatever, whatever it would be.
Maximus. Can we say that on the video? Probably not.
I think you can.
Yeah, we'll cut that. Anyway, okay, useful. A couple of kind of quick-fire questions just to wrap this up then, Robert. First of all, is it fair to at least say that buying any kind of hybrid is better than buying a pure ICE car?
That's a hard one, isn't it? Is it better? It definitely was 5 years ago. It probably was 3 years ago. It's really on the cusp. Because almost this is how I would judge it.
What's your uncertainty?
So
if you bought additional resources and materials required?
And fuel use. So if you bought the smallest, lightest, most fuel efficient 3-cylinder little petrol car, super small, lightweight car, it's hard to argue against that because the amount of materials in it is less than if you buy a plug-in hybrid 3-ton SUV. And of course, people buy a 3-ton because SUVs are still so mind-bogglingly, confusingly popular that they'll buy a huge, heavy car that has a petrol or diesel engine and a huge battery and an electric motor and all the concomitant complexities of that. I cannot argue that is better than just buying a petrol version. Just get the petrol one and shut up. Don't get over it because, the resale value. I think the resale value of plug-in hybrids and petrol and diesel engines in the next 5 years are only going to do one thing, and that is fall off a cliff. And we're seeing it. The resale value of electric cars keeps going up, which is a problem for people who want to buy second-hand electric cars because the value is not dropping.
So if you're if you're adamant that you live somewhere where pure electric is simply not an option, which is the case in certain parts of the world. In the UK it's not, but it is in certain parts of the world. What sort of numbers can they be looking at when choosing a car to make sure that are you simply looking at the CO2 emissions to decide whether this little ICE car is the right choice for me over this kind of hulking great mild hybrid, warm hybrid PHEV?
I mean, I think in terms of hybrids, I always looked at it in terms of fuel economy, and that was the only thing I judged it on. when I had them back in, whenever that was, 11, 12, 15 years ago. So that's how I've judged it. And in terms of CO2 output, if you're using the engine less, then it's got to be lower. Over a year, the CO2 output, even of a big plug-in hybrid, has got to be less than a pure petrol or diesel, SUV. It's got to be less.
Yeah.
But the Range Rover plug-in hybrid, it's such a huge, heavy car anyway, that when the petrol engine does work, it uses a lot of petrol because it's pulling along a massive, great tank.
It's just kind of,
and that's the
whole thing is an oxymoron.
Yeah, because I think big electric cars, I wish they had done a pure electric version of the new Defender, because I think it looks great, that car. It's an amazing looking car. And they will do it, and they are going to do it. And I've had emails from them saying they will do it, and we're going to go and see them at their, But, if they could have done that now, that would have been. Imagine our reaction to that car would have been totally different. Anyway, yeah. So it's a real. We really are. That is the tipping point we're at the moment, where it really is. It's so hard to argue for anything other. Just get an electric one. It's fine. You'll be all right. It'll work.
TLDR. Just get an electric car.
Get an electric car.
If you can make do with a PHEV, you can definitely make do with an electric car. If you live somewhere where there is just no charging whatsoever, the mild hybrid, the full hybrid is maybe a bit better than pure ICE, but not if it's a hulking great 8-ton Goliath of a thing.
Yeah, I think I would go for get a Prius equivalent, rather than a 3-ton SUV that's got plug-in hybrid capabilities, because it's not worth it. The Prius is, I still argue, the Prius is an amazing machine. All the time, all the experience I had with those was incredibly positive. They're really reliable, very cheap to run, very easy to drive, and you don't have to worry about anything. If I'd still prefer to see a Prius on the road than a diesel car.
Well, we've done that now. Shall we never speak of hybrids again?
Let's never mention them ever again.
Do you want to sign us off, Robert?
Oh, well, there we go. We've really gone into great detail about hybrids.
As usual, a very structured and coherent, linear discussion between the two of us.
I want to quickly mention BMW i3 range extended.
Go on.
I love the idea of that, but then can remember 3 distinct conversations with people who had them, and they said, next time I'm not going to have a range extender. I never use it, but I love that car. And then the VW, which I've driven on fully charged, the VW little XL1. XL1 was brilliant.
I was with the sort of spiritual successor to that car in Germany recently, in the EQXX, a kind of study in maximum efficiency. And you look at that and you have this kind of brainwave moment. Well, let's not just take these giant SUVs we've been building and just put batteries in them. That's a flawed idea. The whole concept needs to be reconsidered from the ground up.
Yeah. And then the BMW i8.
You like that car?
Well, it was the only time in the last 10 years where I've really, really enjoyed the sound of an engine, partly because I couldn't believe what I was hearing was from a 3-cylinder petrol engine.
Fizzy little thing.
Amazing car. That is amazing, but ridiculous and crazy, but I was very impressed with that. So there we go. Shall I sign off?
Sign us off, Robert.
Subscribe, Patreon.
They should subscribe,
it's all down there. Leave comments. We do actually like hearing your comments if they're nice and full of love.
It's so rubbish.
I've got worse and worse at it. And finally, as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.
Farnborough, Amsterdam, San Diego, Sydney, the #1 festival for clean energy and electric vehicles is coming to you. Whether it's Fully Charged Live in Europe, supported by Mobility Service, or Fully Charged Live UK, supported by LV, we cannot wait to see you there.
Really hope you enjoyed that. We're so lucky to have Jack on board. I mean, okay, he's very tall, much taller than me, but he's an amazing guy. Really knows his stuff. just knows a lot about cars, which is I really, really appreciate. Here's another episode that Jack did, an absolute classic. Do have a look at that. That's our latest episode just come out. Up there, you can subscribe to Fully Charged Show, and up there, you can support us on Patreon. Thank you.